Hello. The day that I am posting this is the day that the Sony 200-600 is finally released. I've had a chance to shoot with this, doing some wild birding, and I want to tell you what it's like to shoot within those conditions. So let's get into it. So I was lucky enough recently to shoot with the Sony 200-600 a little bit before it was released. Thank you to Sony for giving me the opportunity to take a look at that. My local rep I've got a relationship with, who was able to help me out to be able to shoot with it. And I took it and did some wild birding with it. And so I'm going to show you images from that shoot, what it's like to work with, talk you through what the experience was like, because it hit stores the day that I am posting this. So hopefully this will be useful as you're taking a look to see if this is going to be a good lens for you, if it's a good fit for you and what you want to shoot. Before we jump into that, of course, everything we do here is brought to you by Camera Lessons Online. What we believe is very simple, that great proficiency in the visual arts is a completely learnable skill, and we're here to help you out with that. To facilitate that, we've got a 4-hour introduction to photography course on the website. We've got a couple books on there. I encourage you to go check it out. There's some links in the description. So let's get into it. I took the 200-600 birding with the Sony A7R Mark III. And straight away, the handling is the first thing we got to talk about. It's a big lens, it's a heavy lens, but it's a very usable lens, and I want to walk you through what I mean there. First, and I think most importantly, this is an internal focus lens. The barrel characteristics do not change as you zoom. Okay, so weight distribution does not change, which means hand holdability doesn't change. Up until now, to shoot 600 millimeter, realistically, most people have been shooting a Tamron or a Sigma 150-600, and they've been adapting an A-mount version of that onto the E-mount camera. And all of those lenses, they are not internal focus, so the barrel extends as you zoom, which means it's harder to shoot at 600 millimeter than at 400 millimeter. Now that's important because the money in the lens is from 400 to 600. That's what's new, right, over the 100 to 400 Sony. So this lens is easier to shoot with from 400 to 600 than a 150 to 600. Also, it's smaller at those focal lengths. It's larger than a 150 to 600 when it's collapsed. But once you go to the money of the lens, 400 to 600 millimeter, this is smaller. It is also less aperture variable. It's an f5.6 to an f6.3. So there's a 1/3 of a stop differentiating value to the aperture. And I think that they did that in order to maintain internal focus and not make the lens even bigger and heavier, which helps in hand holdability. And I think that's important because I spent half my time shooting this on a tripod, the other half of the time hand holding it, and it is hand holdable. Yeah, it's heavy, of course it is, but it is doable. The stabilization works like a charm when you're working with it. I did not use it all the time because I was shooting at fast shutter speeds, but I did test it and it worked very well. And you can hand hold it with its distribution. The other nice thing is the barrel throw is short on this lens. You could hold it, and with just the pinky of your finger, you could rotate from the beginning to the end of the zoom barrel, just with a pinky movement. And what's nice about that is you don't have to redo your hand position in order to be able to work this lens. If you've got action coming at you or farther away from you, you can adjust and work this lens, which is a very useful trait. Other characteristics you should know about: this is teleconvertible. The 1.4 will work with it. Now, I recently learned something very interesting. In September, Sony is releasing the A7R Mark IV. That camera has f11 focusing crosshairs, and the A9 today has f11 focusing crosshairs, which means you can teleconvert a 2x teleconverter onto this lens, and it will autofocus on an A9 and a Sony A7R Mark IV. No, and those are going to be the only two cameras in the world with f11 focusing crosshairs, which is very, very cool. What's going to be different, or at least inconvenient, about this lens? And it doesn't do to harp on, oh, it's a big heavy lens. Anything that goes to 600 millimeter is going to be a big heavy lens, right? I don't find that to be an interesting thing to discuss or to comment on. But one thing that is interesting is the focus limiter on it. You've got full, all right, 2.4 to 10 meter and 10 meter to infinity. Now, 10 meter to infinity, I think, is the appropriate focus limiting range, because if I'm going to focus limit for farther away wildlife, they're usually farther away, right? Usually that 10 meter kind of range is really appropriate. I never thought it was super useful to have a 3 or a 5 meter to infinity focus limiter, because that's just too much range. I need to constrict that a little bit. But please pay attention to the other portion, 2.4 to 10 meter. Not that we use that portion, the up close portion of the limiter very much, but your minimum focusing distance with this lens is 2.4 meter. And that is not that close. I did have a bird land right next to me. And by right next to me, I don't mean at my shoulder, right? I mean like 5 feet away. Well, lens just couldn't focus on it. It was just too close. This is a far away only lens. Not that we necessarily expected much else, but I think they sacrificed some minimum focusing distance in order to maintain the size, weight, and cost of the lens. Another thing that I've been asked as this was about to come out is the tripod collar. For people who have a Really Right Stuff replacement tripod collar, this is a replaceable one like the 100 to 400 is, but it is a different tripod collar. You can't just take the one from the 100 to 400 and slide it in and have it work the same. It is a different tripod collar, which is a little bit of a shame. It would be nice if it was the same, but it's not. C'est la vie, I suppose. So let's talk about stabilization next. Stabilization works crazy well on this, and you do have panning modes as well as your normal stable mode. And even more importantly in the stabilization is the speed. It's not exactly the same rail focusing system of the 400mm 2.8 or the 600mm f4, but this thing is crazy fast. This is so fast that I didn't notice it pull focus a lot of the times. I just pushed a button and it was already there as I was following along. And it works with the tracking system, of the updated tracking system of a Sony a7R III beautifully. So it keeps up with an A9, with an R3, with an A3. This thing is very fast. It is built for high action sports. It is built for wildlife. This is something I'd feel very comfortable with for a safari, feel something very comfortable with for birding. If I was shooting sports with a larger field like lacrosse or soccer or football, I would be very comfortable with this lens. Now I know it's a dimmer lens, 5.6 to 6.3, but honestly, this thing's big enough already without adding the size of trying to make it a 4 to 5.6. That would have just been enormous. So 5.6 to 6.3 feels pretty comfortable to it. So takeaways from working with this lens. I loved the color rendition. I loved its color accuracy. I loved its sharpness. And I just cannot say enough for its speed. I was shooting 1/1600th of a second to 2,000th of a second almost exclusively, which means that the stabilization, you know, when you're shooting those kind of high action things, it's not going to come too much into it, but they still really did a great job with the stabilizer for shooting slower speed kind of situations at a distance. This lens checks every single box. I would say it's my favorite super telephoto lens that I have shot with, even above the 100 to 400. As much as I love that lens, and I do love that lens, I love the ability to zoom the barrel of this lens from minimum focusing distance all the way, not minimum focus distance, sorry, but from 200 to 600mm on the zoom barrel. I love the ability to do that with one finger without changing my hand position. I've never been able to do that on a single lens before, and I could do it here, which was amazing. So if farther away, not very good up close, larger telephoto lens is something that has a use for you, I think this is a winner. This is an absolute winner lens, and worth every penny of the $2,000 that Sony is asking for it. So that's my thoughts. Those are the example images that I showed you there. I hope that this was useful, or at least entertaining. And if it was, of course, just like everybody on YouTube, I'm going to ask you to like and subscribe. You knew that. It's free. And thank you so much for taking your time to watch. I appreciate it. And I'll see you next time. Bye.